Hello, and welcome to our final event, a little tear for the 2012 Sagan National Colloquium. As you might know, my name is Chris Fink, and I'm a faculty member here in Health and Human Kinetics, and I'm also the director of the series, the Colloquium series this year. And the past several months have really been wonderful, I think. We've had so many exceptional speakers come through campus and events, all exploring this idea of the mutually transformative relationship between people and food. And we've had, as you might recall, a farmer's market back when the weather was a little bit warmer. Still was sunny like this. We had a great day for that back in September. We had a local food event just a month or so ago that highlighted a lot of organizations doing work in our region. We've had a collaboration with the Innovative Farmers of Ohio just a week ago, or 2 weeks. Now my time is getting messed up. But we've had fantastic speakers enlightening us about things from public health, nutrition, sustainable and industrial agriculture, food justice, local food economies, urban agriculture in Cuba, Kurdish food traditions, fast food culture in India, the academic focus of food right here on our campus, food and art. I mean, we've really spanned a lot of great area. And it's really been an honor to be part of this series, and I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. We've also been able to raise some money for the Early Childhood Center, several $100s through T-shirt sales for their learning garden that's already being built. The kids are painting the raised beds not as we speak. It's dark out, but they're doing it these days, and and it's really wonderful to see. And the children, their parents, they're all excited to have the opportunity to learn more about their food and how to grow it and where it comes from, and they'll be doing that all through the year and in the summer. So thanks to everybody who's helped with that. I'd like to thank Paula Travis, too, the coordinator of the Colloquium. It's hard to start where to start about all the help that Paula's been. Yes, please. And that's something she does every year, so it's astounding to me that she's so young and vibrant in like 1 year, and I'm ready to turn gray and get older. So great for her. And thank you to our staff student, Maddie Mavek, for all of her great work. And there's been a lot of other students and other people who've helped, and I just wanted to take a minute and thank them as well. But tonight I'm thrilled, I really am, and honored also to welcome Dr. Fabio Parasecoli from the New School for Public Engagement in New York. I actually met Fabio in May of 2010. I was visiting the University of Gastronomic Sciences. Yes, there is such a fantastic place, and it's in Palenzo, Italy. And that visit has led to all sorts of wonderful opportunities since that time for both me and students here at Ohio Wesleyan, which has been fantastic. We had a visit during a travel learning course in 2011, and a second planned visit this spring in 2013 with students where they'll be sharing some research results from a project here on our campus. He was also the person who encouraged me to join the Association for the Study of Food and Society, which has been really a wonderful organization for me to be part of, and I wanted to take a second to thank him for that encouragement as well. As I mentioned, he's a associate professor at the New School for Public Engagement in New York City. He's the coordinator of the Food Studies program there. He earned his bachelor and MA degrees in Asian Studies from La Sapienza University in Rome, an MA in Political Science from the Istituto Universitario Orientale in Naples, Italy. Did I get that close enough anyway? An MA in Political Science there, and a doctorate in Agricultural Sciences from Hohenheim University in Stuttgart, Germany. He's the program director and has been consulting with Gusto Lab, a center for food and culture in Rome, teaches food and media courses at the University of Gastronomic Sciences, as well as in an MBA program in food and wine at the University of Bologna in Italy. His work explores the intersection of food, media, and politics. He's written several books, including Food Culture in Italy, Introduction to Culinary Cultures in Europe, and Bite Me, Food in Popular Culture. I had to stay at a microphone and say, bite me, thank you for that opportunity. He's co-editor of a recently published 6-volume cultural history of food, which is fantastic. And you can find him writing a nice food column also in the Huffington Post online. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Fabio Parasecoli to Ohio Wesleyan.
Thank you, first of all, Chris and Paula, for inviting me and help organizing this talk. It's very exciting. I had never been here. It's the first time. It's a wonderful campus. I was talking to Chris. We're in New York. We're on top of each other. And here, you know, you've got room and greenery and trees. And we've been through Sandy, so that's been a little tough. It's nice to come out to a place that has not been affected in the same way. Anyway, so what I'm going to do tonight is try to think a little bit about food and film. How do you go to the broadcasts? No. Which one is?
Like you, the windows.
From the beginning,
yeah.
Maybe this one. There we go. So why film? This is still a work in progress. It's a new project I'm working on for a new book that is going to be called Feast Your Eyes. And it's precisely about food, film, and cultural citizenship. Why this connection? Well, in a way, I think that we sometimes do not realize how much media impact the way we perceive what we eat, we think of what we eat, and also guide the choices of what we eat. Here I've just put up a couple of examples. You have Cooking Mama, which is a video game, supposedly for young girls, but isn't that problematic that basically you start having young girls thinking of themselves as cooking mamas as they grow up, and all the tasks are about creating dishes and following recipes and whatnot. It's sort of a training to become, you know, not only a person who can cook, but sort of a housewife. So is the video game completely innocent, or does it participate in reinforcing gender roles that are already there and, you know, they're changing? It's quite complicated. On the other hand, you might have something like that. That's advertising from Dolce & Gabbana. I don't know if you're familiar with Italian designers. You have this Madonna-like character. She really looks like Madonna, but she's not. At the table, and that's the other side of sort of the cooking mama, but she's not exactly the same thing. So what sort of images do come from media? How do we sort of think of these two different cooking mamas? What do they tell about us, about our cooking mamas and the women that are around us? I really think even if media are there to entertain, very often have a much deeper impact than we think. And very often food is not at the foreground. It's sort of mixed in there, like in the Dolce & Gabbana advertising. I don't think many people focus on the tomatoes first. But then you see food is there, and you're like, huh, what is she doing there? I mean, that sort of person. It's interesting the way food has been used in media in general to deal with issues of gender, race, class, ethnicity, and we'll talk more about that. But I think it's important as citizens that we acquire the tools to sort of understand what's going on, analyze, and in a way defend ourselves so that we can really make our choices and try to filter what comes through the media. The subtleties sometimes really built on deep social problems. Look at this. Both of them are cookbooks about Southern food. As you can see, they have very different ideas of what Southern food is, right? On the left, you have this sort of clearly well-off white person in front of his plantation house. On the other hand, you have Edna Lewis, which is sort of one of the most important African-American cookbook writers here in the country, talking about her experience of Southern cooking. The content and the approach, as you can imagine, is really different. So how do each book reinforces certain ideas of what Southern cooking is, who is behind Southern cooking, who cooks, who consumes, in a way. This person is clearly a person that probably tends to consume, while Edna grew up as a cook. So even if the title is quite similar, the values behind that and the social realities that the books refer to are quite different. To the point that we can go to competing worldviews. On one hand, you have Super Size Me. I don't know if you guys saw the movie. It's about this guy that decides to eat exclusively McDonald's 3 times a day for 40 days, something insane. And so, of course, he gets sick, he gains weight, and, you know, he becomes a very unhappy person. On the other hand, you have a documentary that was made as a response called Fathead that basically tries to debunk, point by point, what was sort of explained in the first documentary. So here, for instance, it's a good example to show that food becomes the center of very important political discussions. Here it's about, does the state, the government needs to intervene on telling you what's healthy and what not? How can you educate people? Do we need to leave everything to personal initiative? Do we need education? Does the government has to intervene in that? Those are the themes discussed in those movies. And the approach is so opposite that it's clearly the translation of very deep political issues. And it's the issues that we've been listening to during the campaign. It's about, you know, big government, small government, taxes, not taxes. You might have heard that in New York now it's not legal for fast food restaurants to sell soft drinks more than 16 ounces. That was a huge debate in New York. It's an attempt of the mayor to cut the excessive consumption of sugar. Is that the right way to go? Can a mayor decide what you consume? So these are the themes that they look around, you know, about food and health, but actually are deeply, deeply political. Now, I want to look at movies in a way because they're among the most popular media. They have a long history now. And we're now exposed to movies in so many ways. Before, you had to go to the movie theater. And then movies started being shown on TV. And now you have Netflix on your iPad, so you can watch whatever you want, whenever you want. You can even have movies on your iPhone and watch movies while you're traveling or while you're supposed to be listening to a lecture. I've seen that happen. Movies, in a way, become really part of the sort of cultural universe of which we're part. We're really steeped into them. And in a way, they're very powerful because they present us with images, but also narratives, stories. And we know how stories are important in cultural transmission and cultural reproduction. You know, in the past, communities sort of passed traditions and rules and ideas from generation to generation through stories. Now we have these sort of visual stories. They can be long, they can be short, they can be videos, they can be full features. Also, an interesting element is that it's very easy for us now to access movie also from the past, which was not the case before. You had to go to some library. Now, as I said, if you go to Netflix, you have movies from the 20s, from the 30s. You can buy DVDs, you can download them for free from the internet. So in a way, movies from very different ages are available to us if we're interested. So I wanted to see how food played into American movies, and specifically American movies. They are very different, and I'll show some differences when I talk, for instance, of Italian movies, the country I'm from. So food, as you can see in these images, has been present in movies since the beginning. Even in silent movies, you have food as an element of action. Remember, at the time, there was no sound. So everything had to be action. To maintain the attention of the viewers, the movie had to be full of things happening and extreme movements and whatnot. Food was fantastic for that. And especially the pies created a lot of movement. You know, you have people with cream all over the place and fights and pies flying from one room to another. And then there was also the famous banana peel, you know, in lots of silent movies, and that also provided the occasion for a lot of movement happening on the screen. So in these movies, food was not really part of the story, was just the excuse for some comedy and for some physical action. But it was not always the case. For instance, we have the movies with Charlie Chaplin. Here I have Gold Rush and Modern Times, where already food becomes important to, in the case of Gold Rush, to tell you something about the character. This is a famous scene where Charlie Chaplin cooks a shoe and then eats it. And this scene is really about the hardships that, you know, people were going through during the Gold Rush. It's about poverty, it's about hunger. So already at this point, food was not just a question of creating action and movement on the screen, but really allowed the filmmaker to say something about the story or the characters. In Modern Times, food is used as part of a critique of mechanization. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie. If you haven't, could be interesting to watch, even if it's a very old one. This is a worker that basically is forced to eat through this machine so that he doesn't waste time during his lunch break. And of course it doesn't work, so the machine basically tortures him. So here already food is used as a tool to critique this extreme mechanization that Chaplin was seeing already happening in 1939. It was the Fordism and the expansion of the American industry before the war. Even before that, we have this very interesting movie. It's very short, and you can download it for free on the internet. You have it on YouTube. It's called A Corner in Wheat from 1919. And it's the story of farmers trying to grow wheat and not being able to have enough food for their families, while the people that buy the wheat and play with wheat on the stock market become rich. So here, really, food is used as a critique for the American society at that time, the Golden Age. So there were capitalists really becoming richer and richer. The stock market becomes important, but there were also lots of people suffering while they were producing food. So it's an irony that the farmers that actually produce the wheat end up being hungry. Here we see also political elements later on in the 40s. So we're at the end of the war, and the US was really trying to create a policy of good neighborhood with South America. And so we have this actress, Portuguese actress who grew up in Brazil. Her name was Carmen Miranda. that became the Brazilian bombshell. That's how she was known at the time. And she became famous for wearing fruit, and in particular bananas. She was the inspiration also for Chiquita Banana, Miss Chiquita. Miss Chiquita starts also in 1946 as a way to advertise bananas. Now, bananas at the time in the US mostly came from Central and South America, where big companies like United Fruit was basically deciding, the future of those countries. They were able to kick out presidents, to create political revolutions so that they would create favorable climates for their business. So banana, in a way, became, in the US, a fruit that was the sign of, a snack, something cheap, something nutritious, something that is good for you, but at the same time, it hid all the political and economic and social problem it was creating in South and Central America. And Carmen Miranda, in a way, it's the perfect Band-Aid for that. So you have this woman that it's very lively and sings, and in a way, she becomes the banana. She wears banana, and in this movie, The Gang's All Here, from 1943, at the end, her hat explodes in bananas, and basically it occupies the whole screen. So in a way, metaphorically, she becomes the bananas. She becomes the South American person, and in particular woman, that is there to be consumed by the American viewers. So it's funny, it's entertaining, but what's behind that and the politics that these movies were sort of hiding were really crucial at the time. Food can also be used for propaganda, and here I go back to my country. I don't know if you recognize this guy. His name is Benito Mussolini. He was our dictator, real-life dictator for 20 years. He was one of the first politicians in the mid of the 19th century who realized the power of images for propaganda and the centrality of food to convince Italians to follow him in his project. He also had this idea that his physical presence, his physicality was important to convince Italians. So in other movies, these are documentaries. In other documentaries, he shows up without shirt, gathering wheat. For the time, there were no other, can you imagine Churchill or, Hitler without a shirt on a field gathering wheat? He realized that he was becoming the food producers that he wanted to show Italians at the moment when Italians were starting suffering from hunger because of his political plans, his alliance with the Nazis and whatnot. And as we've seen with Carmen Miranda, food can be used in a way for propaganda to cover certain realities or make reality look a little different. The reaction to that was the use of food in Italian Neorealism. This is a sort of school of movies that came out right after the war, and it was started by kids that had been in film school under fascism. And actually, fascism started the first film school in Italy and created sort of the Italian Hollywood called Cinecittà, which became very important in the 60s and whatnot. So what happened at that point? You have young filmmakers that have been trained to make propaganda documentaries to sort of sustain the dictator. As soon as the dictator falls and the war ends, they want to do something different, and they want to show reality as it is. What was one of the major problems at the time in Italy? Hunger. After the war, people did not have stuff to eat. The whole production system was destroyed by the war. Half of Italy had been invaded by the Nazis. Food became central in the daily life of Italians, became central as social issue, and became central in politics. Which party after the war was able to ensure food? So these filmmakers use food in very interesting ways precisely to show reality, to show hunger. So while 10 years, 15 years before, food was used to hide reality, here is used to underline it. And we have the famous scene in Bicycle Thieves by Vittorio De Sica, where you have this poor child that goes into a restaurant for the first time, and he really doesn't know how to use silverware. And he's got this thing, it's 2 slices of bread with mozzarella in between, breaded and fried. It's a very simple dish, but for him it was a luxury, and actually he was feeling guilty that his dad was wasting money to go to a restaurant and eat that. And the other movie, The Earth Trembles, is about a family of fishermen in Sicily. And it's visually a stunning movie, but also underlines the poverty of certain regions in southern Italy. So suddenly, food, it's very crucial for these filmmakers because they want to reflect reality, or even exaggerate reality to underline the problems that were there. And they knew that Italians at that time were hungry, and they would understand, and food would really, in a way, affect them and bring them into the movie that they were watching. At the time, by the way, movies were the only entertainment in Italy. TV in Italy would start only in 1954. So everybody went to the movies, and if there was not a movie theater, they would put, a wall, and they would project on a wall in the main square of a village. It was pretty common. So lots of people did see these movies. Now we consider them sort of intellectuals, intellectual movies, art house movies. At the time, they were not. People were actually watching them. So how is food used in movies? Or how has it been used in movies until maybe the 90s? First of all, to define time and place, to give you an element of realism. Here I've put a couple of movies, Marie Antoinette from 2006 and a movie by Kurosawa in 52. Immediately looking at the places where people eat, what they eat, how they eat, they give you a sense of reality. They sort of suck you in that period and that specific place. If you see, I don't know, a medieval banquet, you see the long table with the king sitting at the center, eating a huge, I don't know, mutton or something like that, immediately it makes you feel that what you're seeing is more real. So constantly, since the beginning of movies, food has been used like that, in many different ways and in many different occasions. It's also been used to sort of explain characters to viewers. We have Trading Places from 1983. I don't know if you've ever seen this movie. This is a Wall Street person that suddenly becomes poor. He crashes the Christmas party at his company and hides salmon in his suit, and he started eating it with his beard. And that scene really underlines the changes that he's going through and the shock that he's going through in a way. And the other scene is very famous in Pretty Woman when Julia Roberts is taught how to eat properly in good company. Oops, I'm sorry. And so it's really crucial because it underlines the social status of Julia Roberts, but also her will to learn, to better herself. And in a way, it also plays on gender roles. You have the educated man that suddenly become the savior and the person that betters the poor lost woman. So it becomes quite complicated from that point of view. It also allowed for great interaction among characters. You have the famous scene when Harry met Sally. I don't know if you remember that, when she pretends to have an orgasm while eating a sandwich and starts screaming in the restaurant like she's having sex, and everybody stops and look at her, and a woman famously says, "I'm having what she's having." But the scene is important. It's a crucial moment where Harry and Sally understand each other and what they are and what they're after. So very often dinner scenes or scenes of food sharing are represented because, like in real life, that's where people get together. That's where people talk to each other. That's where people decide things or fight and whatnot. The other movie is The Breakfast Club, where you have a group of high school kids that are punished and they have to spend a day together, they have to eat together. So the different characters reveal themselves also through what they eat. And then it also helps to push the plot along. So in Spider-Man, that maybe it's a more recent movie, you might have seen it, not the rebooted version that just came out, the one of 10 years ago. Can you believe they rebooted a series after 10 years? But that's another story. The Thanksgiving dinner becomes a very nodal point in the plot because that's where the Goblin discovers the real identity of Peter Parker as Spider-Man. And it happens while they're eating, you know, around the turkey. Peter Parker has been late, coming with a can of cranberry and whatnot. So in a way, it becomes a plot, a knot in the narratives that really explain what happens after. Same thing for The Big Chill. It's a group of friends that get together and they cook together. And that becomes the moment where they gather, and from this gathering, lots of things happen. So the role of food in plots has been used quite a bit. And that something happens. At the end of the 80s, there is the beginning of what now we tend to call food movies. So it's sort of a new genre that has become extremely popular. It started abroad, not in the US, and here we have some of the first movies. We have Tampopo, a Japanese movie from 1985. It's the story of a woman that wants to become a master of noodles, and she works with a set of weird characters that help her get to her goal. We have Babette's Feast in 1987, the story of a French woman that ends up living in Denmark in a very strict Protestant village, and she cooks this fantastic dinner using the money she has won in a lottery. And then you have 1992, like Water for Chocolate, a Mexican movie about a family living on a ranch, and it's the story of a cook, Tita, and how she expressed herself through food. So these three movies, in a way, mark a different role of food in movies in general. We've seen that food was present before to show you the characters, to move the plot of the movie, to give you a sense of realism. Here, food becomes the protagonist. It's not just something that is used for something else. Food becomes the core of the story, of the narrative. Food becomes the core of the characters. That's the way characters express themselves. And this is possible also because technically it became doable to make food look good on film. That's very difficult. When you put food in front of a camera and strong lights for a long time, the food doesn't look very appetizing. It all becomes sort of brownish and really not good. So they had to develop techniques to make the food look good, and they had to work on lighting and editing and framing to make it look appetizing. And what happened is actually they borrowed lots of techniques from porn. So it's the beginning of the development of what we now call food porn, which for me it's a technical term for a certain visual style. Food porn has been used in all possible ways, as you can imagine. For me, it's really that style of visual that has been borrowed by hardcore porn. The attention to, the detail, the textures, the lighting, the music, the sounds. In a way, all those techniques are moved onto food, which means that producers are ready to invest on food. You know how food films are made, right? You have the same scene that might be shot 10, 12 times. Every time, the food has to look exactly the same, which means that you have, if you're filming a dinner, you have to have 10 spreads that look exactly the same. In terms of production, it's a huge cost. So the fact that filmmakers decided to incur those costs points to the fact that they realized that food was just more than a tool for narration, but it would have elicited enough attention from viewers that it could become the core. So this is the new visual style I was mentioning. It's not so, this is still the beginning, it will evolve over time, but we have very close-ups of dishes, so you can really see the textures. The sounds of the cooking are increased, heightened. So you can really hear water simmering or stuff frying because they turn the volume up. So since you cannot smell it and you cannot taste it, at least you can hear the food. You also have lots of close-ups on hands cooking. That's one of the typical shots. And then you have, like here, images of people eating and really focusing on their expressions. So in a way, you cannot be there and eat, so the actors really have to make you understand that what they're eating is real good. And so you have all these sounds and faces and whatnot. And then you have the full body person, you see the kitchen. The kitchen becomes an interesting place. In the past few years, as you've seen on TV, on papers, you know, chefs have become celebrities, lots of reality shows. So the kitchen has become an interesting place. The plots are centered on food. These are images from Tampopo, which is all about noodle making in a very crazy way. It's a very interesting movie. The narrative is creative, but the core is this: how do you become a perfect noodle master? It also develops characters. While before it was just a way to make you understand the character better, here food really impacts the way characters develop. And this is the story of Tita in Like Water for Chocolate, cooking traditional Mexican foods, learning from her Indio maids and whatnot. And then there is this element of culinary tourism, which becomes important for the question of cultural citizenship I was mentioning before, which is the big question: who belongs to America? Who is an American? Who sits at the table? And as I mentioned before, the discussions around the elections made us understood how important that theme is. You know, what's the impact of immigrants in American culture, even politically? Here we're talking not about political citizenship, we're talking about cultural citizenship. So to which point certain people are considered to be in the fold of American mainstream, or to which point are they felt as external, as different, as part of the American melting pot, but not really being part of it, sort of being satellites. And here we have two good examples. One is Soul Food, that focuses on African American food, and What's Cooking, that looks at different ethnic families, a Latino family, a Jewish family, a Vietnamese family, and an African American family in Los Angeles. And in a way, why do I call these movies culinary tourism? Because it allowed the viewers to sort of look into other ethnicities' houses that maybe he or she has never seen in real life. So you are like a tourist. You go for a period, you look around, but you're not really involved in what you're seeing, which in a way facilitates cultural understanding because you understand more of the other community, but at the same time reaffirms the fact that you're not part of that community and that community is separate and you're visiting as a tourist. So it's a double-edged sword, in my opinion. Yes, it makes the traditions, the food of certain communities known to mainstream America, but underlines the status of this community as sort of outliers or outsiders. The others are depicted as exotic. The word exotic comes from the word Greek exo, which means out there. So making somebody exotic means making it interesting, something that can spice up your life, but by doing this, you place it up there. It's something that really does not relate with my everyday life. And these are two good examples. One is Woman on Top, where Penelope Cruz plays a Brazilian chef, and then you have The Mistress of Spices, about this sort of witch that can cure using spices, but she can use spices also for other people's good, not for her own good or for her own pleasure. Which is also very complicated because very often these exotic women are women that cook for a living. And so they have this aspect of service that is somehow reaffirmed through these movies. Also, men become a little complicated to represent. Here we have Big Night about Italian immigrants, and today's special about Indian immigrants. And the ethnic male in America has always been a complicated figure, in a way. It's a threatening figure, it's a fascinating figure. In both movies here, it's a domesticated figure. It's a male that tries to fit in and use food service as a way to make a living. So in a way, it neutralizes him. You also have more domestic women. You have Julia in the famous Julie and Julia movie from 3 years ago. I don't know if you saw that. It's a fun movie. It's the story of Julia Child and Julie, who's this woman who decides to cook all Julia Child's recipes in a year. And this is a woman that is not satisfied with her job. She wants to assert herself, but she does it in a very domestic way. She wants to become a writer, but she doesn't go out there. She tries to make it from her home, from a place where she feels safe. Pieces of April complicates a little bit the thing, because here it's a young woman that wants to cook Thanksgiving dinner for her family, and she doesn't know where to start from. So she starts going up and down her tenement in the East Village, trying to understand how to use an oven, what she has to do with the damn bird. It's a funny movie, but it's also somehow touching, because it's this young woman that tries to fit in, and then she decides she doesn't need to. Food is also used, represented as a way for women to become legitimate women. So if, other more masculine fields don't work, there's also always catering. So in many movies, you have these caterer women, and it's complicated. It's Meryl Streep, and the other woman, it's Katherine Heigl, but they're both caterers, which is a job that allows you to maintain your domestic life while working when you feel like. So it's sort of a in-between situation. Some food movies complicate all this by showing you different males. In the first one, in Cooking with Stella, you have a Canadian diplomat that decides to learn how to cook from an Indian woman while being sent to India. And the relationship between the two is quite complicated, because the Indian woman is not understanding why this man, white man, wants to learn how to cook from her. So that's the base of the situation. And in The Kids Are Alright, you have Mark Ruffalo, now famous for being Hulk in the Avengers, that has a restaurant. The women are architects. He's the one that has the food-related restaurant, but he's not like a professional chef like we would see in MasterChef or in Top Chef. He's somebody who grows his vegetables, farm to table. It's sort of a hippie in a way. So it's not your typical professional male chef going towards success. Things really become complicated with female chefs. They want to enter that sphere that very often is male. I don't know if you're aware of that, but in high-end cuisine, in high-end restaurants, there is a tiny minority of female chefs. Women can cook at home. When it comes to being chef in famous restaurant and make it a serious profession, it's male's field. And also when you go to culinary school, you see the difference in the number of students. Male are in much larger numbers. At the new school last year, I organized a panel of different women chefs that shared their stories and how difficult it is for them to assert themselves as professional chefs at a certain level. It's easy to be caterers. If you want to end up with 3 stars on the New York Times, it's even difficult to get a loan. But some of the movies try to present female chefs, sort of to hide the situation, but they end up making it really clear. And one of the examples is Colette in Ratatouille, the cartoon that you might have seen. You know, she's this very tough woman, and she ends up falling in love for the klutz in the restaurant. So she has to give up some of her career. You would think that all these negotiations of gender, class, race, it's only in adult movies. It's not. Kung Fu Panda, it's very much about food. It's about body image and the negotiation of the relationship between men and food. You know, Kung Fu Panda, it's sort of a hefty kid that loves food and is made fun of because of that. And that's his story until the Kung Fu master understands that he can use food to train him to become the dragon warrior. But the whole movie revolves around food. And then you have The Princess of the Frog, which I found a cute movie but extremely problematic. The first time that Disney has an African-American heroine, she works in a kitchen. And even when she becomes a princess, she opens a restaurant. If I had married a prince, I don't know if I would spend my life in Monte Carlo, not really opening restaurants, but that's what happens in the movie. And the food she makes is not really, you know, the traditional African-American Southern food. She makes Creole food. So it's sort of a blackness that it's not really black. It's sort of exotic and ethnic in the way it's presented. And that's it. I mean, this is just to give you a few ideas, but I'm teaching a whole class about it, and I'm developing this idea into a book. The whole point for me was to really reflect on how this media have an influence on how we think of America and who's American, who becomes part of this cultural community, and who's somehow left outside. And I think food movies apparently seem to sort of negate some of the stereotypes. Very often they end up making them even stronger. So next time you watch a movie with food, you know, give it a second look. Right, thank you. If you guys have any questions, we have some time for that. Movies that you've seen or stuff that you're curious about. Quiet. It's interesting, the transition that happened. So this new food movies, food genre started abroad as an art house film. When it transitioned to the US, it also started as an art house movie. Big Night, the one that I showed you about the 2 Italian immigrants, was supposed to be a small budget art house movie. But it became so popular that basically it marked the real beginning of food movies in the US. Producers in Hollywood were like, there is some money to be made here. And starting from that moment, the flood started. So the transition started in the art house, but as very often happens, when Hollywood realizes that there's money to be made in certain things, and when they play, then they play hard.
You mentioned that there were some films that showed like different male roles around food. Do you think that may be starting to happen with women, or it's just not even there?
No, it's happening with women, but I think all these movies, you would think, that there are, like in No Reservations, that Catherine Zeta-Jones playing a professional chef. You would think that the movie is trying to make you see that female professional chefs can exist. But then how the narrative goes and the stories makes you realize that, yes, she's a professional chef, but after all, what she's after is romantic love. And the same thing happens with Colette. So it's not like they're not there, but eventually they're present on the screen, ends up making them less powerful. And so on the side, you have the caterers that are in this between situation between home and the professional world. And very often they work from home. Or if they have a store, they're trying to build a kitchen at home so that they can work from home. So that's my whole point that I also want to make in the book. This seems to be very alternative, very progressive movies in a way, even if they're comedies or romantic comedies or drama. If you really look at the narrative and what happens, they do reproduce stereotypes and gender and race roles that might not be completely positive. Ooh. I think actually we'll see more chefs on the screen because chefs have become such an important part of contemporary media in America. It's the celebrity effect. It's the food celebrity. So I think we'll see more of that in TV, on newspapers, and on the screen. But there's also a huge development of nonfiction, of film documentaries. And there we have two genres. You have the very political one that look at how our food system is messed up and what we need to do to change it, and look at problems of water, of GMOs, hunger. So the documentary becomes a political tool. And then you have another genre of documentary that focuses on chefs. I recently wrote 2, and a third piece is coming out on the Huffington Post on documentaries focusing on haute cuisine chef. So the Brass brothers in France. Jiro, I can't remember his last name in Japan. The movie is called Jiro Dreams of Sushi. And recently there's been another one called 3 Stars that looks at the Michelin guide system, but focusing on 9 world-famous chefs. So even in the documentary world that until maybe 3-4 years ago was very much about political issues, we see the chefs. Because filmmakers know that they attract people. Those are the celebrities of the food world, in a way. So now we have the production of political documentaries still continues, but we have this new genre too.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that has some reflection on any shift in the relationship to food in America? Does it drive a wedge between the sort of, I can't get there, so I can't cook, so I'm going to watch it? Some sort of
I think there are 2 things happening at the same time. In a way, lots of people are becoming involved in what now it's referred to as the food movement. So trying to look at the food system and what can be changed, local food, sustainable food production, and all that. And very often these people end up being foodies. So people that like to go out to restaurants are interested in chefs, and they might also enjoy, watching Top Chef on TV. But then I think there is a whole category of people that just use that as entertainment, as a spectacle, without any intention of ever cooking. All the production of cookbooks in the US is amazing. Based on the number of cookbooks produced every year, you would think everybody cooks daily, at least twice. As you know, that's not really the case. So what's the function of the cookbook? Very often it becomes a fantasy space, becomes a place of relaxation, or becomes a place of culinary tourism. There is a huge market for, foreign cuisines. And I'm afraid that very often they also look at these TV shows like that. The way the food channel has changed over the years would seem to indicate that. When they started, you had lots of shows that were instructional. They were actually teaching you how to make things, how to cook. Those shows disappeared because people were bored. And you have Emerald, and you have Iron Chef, and you have Top Chefs, and you have shows with more entertainment value. Now, as I said, there is also a big chunk of public that is really interested in food in terms of health and social and cultural implications. So now the Food Channel has started a new channel called the Cooking Channel, that is really more about food, but still the spectacle is there. Of course, they're doing TV. They're not there to educate you. But I'm afraid that much of the chef craze, it's just the American passion for celebrity projected onto the food world.
Have you done, or do you know of anyone that's done any analysis on, say, YouTube and the types of food-related videos that are posted there?
Not yet. I've done some of that work with students at the University of Gastronomic Sciences, and actually I've invited them to come up with videos, and the stuff that's out there, it's really amazing. That's a very interesting topic. I don't know of anything actually being written about that. The same thing for blogs. Now food blogs are huge. And another genre that has become really, really important is food pictures. You go to the restaurant, you take pictures, and you post them on Facebook or on your social network. It's become a whole craze. There are people that would not touch their food before they take a picture. I don't know if you've seen that on your Facebook page. My Facebook page is, maybe because I work in food, it's particularly full, but you see them at restaurants. People that come out with their phone, and some people are very discreet, some people just don't care. And it's a way to share with other people what you're doing, but I suspect it's also a way to underline your cultural capital, to show to people, oh, I know the cool restaurant, I'm eating the food of the up-and-coming chef, and in a way it increases your cultural capital, your status as person in the know. I suspect there is some of that too, especially in New York. Maybe here is different, but New York, that's big. All right, I think that's it. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you. Have a good evening.